I want to thank every single one of you for being here. Especially there's some old faces there. Old in the sense of I haven't seen I got in trouble for this yesterday too. There's some faces from my past.
Nice
That a
save.
little more politically correct. Dang it, 2 days in a row. Oh, well, it is wonderful to be up here. And I'm really excited because I want to talk today about something that's been playing around in my own thoughts for quite a while. And I've had conversations with many of you, and I've talked with my spiritual mentor. I've gone inside, I've contemplated, I've prayed, I've reflected, I've done readings. Because what I want to talk about is lack and limitation. How do we recognize where it exists in our lives, and what do we do when we find it there? So I think many of you know that in this teaching we have this great catchphrase: change your thinking and change your life. It's pretty cool. Kind of grabs your attention. And it points to this idea that the power's in us to make the change, and that we can choose a life that we desire. And again, in this teaching, one of the areas where we see that having a lot of conversation and discussion is around abundance, lack, limitation. And I think that's because generally we are seeking in areas where we are feeling lack. If we've got it down, chances are we're good with it. But we quest where we want to have deeper understanding. And this teaching gives us solutions when we're looking at our life and we're saying, I don't really have the financial resources maybe that I want. I'm not experiencing the richness and the sweetness of life. I'm not having the relationships I want. And there's a lot of meat in this teaching, a lot of ways that we can delve in and explore what's going on. But unfortunately, I think sometimes it gets a little glossed over. We don't necessarily dive deeply into that teaching. And there's a lot of talk out there about surface level, materialism type things. And what I've seen happen is that we then take a look at this change your thinking, change your life. And we look at our own lives and we think we've done the work, we feel we've done the work, but we're not seeing the results. I think sometimes that maybe makes us feel like we're doing something wrong, or we're not really understanding the teaching, or maybe it's just not really all that it's cracked up to be. And so I wanted to focus on that because I think this teaching has a lot of heart and a lot of depth to it. And it also points to the fact that there's so much that we get to do to apply that teaching, to simply delve in and see how we're going to use it in our lives, to make it personalized so that it's not something we're reading in a book or listening to on a tape or even up here on a Sunday sermon, but that we're living and breathing what it means for us so that we can experience that transformation. And so, as I spent time on this idea, I had some ahas that worked for me. And so I thought I'd put them out there today and see if anything sparked for any of you. So I thought a good place to start was way back in the old days. And so I looked at how I framed my life. And what I realized was my realm of possibilities was pretty small. And it really wasn't until I found this teaching that it occurred to me that I could do more than the just enough method of living, just enough money to pay my bills, just enough vacation to calm me down, just enough friends, just enough. And I started looking around at where that just enough showed up for me, financially, relationships, experiences. But beyond all of that, beneath all of that, it was realizing that it showed up in my conceptualization of who and what I could be. That had that same stamp of just enough on it also. And what I realized was I was experiencing poverty in my own mind. was a culture of lack that was so deeply ingrained that for years and years I didn't even think to seek beyond that. I didn't even know that option was available for me. And at least for me, I don't want to speak for anybody else, it seemed like I was so habituated by this is the way it is, that I never even asked the question, can it be different? And along those same lines, and I think what plays into that entrenched way of thinking, is this term we have called race consciousness. Now I'm going to be really honest and tell you I don't like this term. I think it's prone to being misunderstood, and so it loses its effectiveness. But it captures a powerful idea. And that idea is that we are all born into, and we are immersed in, and we continue to live in our own little pocket of how we see the world. And that's influenced by anything and everything, by our own particular, who knows, our genetic history, our personality, our family, our neighborhood, our religion, our culture, national, geographical. Every one of those things piles on to create our own unique worldview, how we see the world, how we interpret it. You know, that's our political affiliation, what type of sports we're into, what our gender preference is. All of these things go into creating unique worlds. And you know, some of them are fantastic. They're supportive and they're uplifting and they bring out a greater depth of being. And some of them aren't. Some of them seek to keep us small and closed in with a limited idea of who we are. And what I know is that with this teaching and with many others, they point the way. They give us the tools to start asking those questions. How can things be different? But again, what I go back to is, for me, I want to understand where I'm living right now so that I can understand what I need to transform. And for me, what was popping around inside my subconscious was ideas that life is hard. We have to struggle to succeed. There's a limited amount of wealth reserved for a very select few. The world's a dangerous place. And what I realized was most of these thoughts were about the can'ts. What we can't do, who we can't be, can't. Which then creates this nice little narrow path into the shoulds. This is what you should do, this is how you should be. Now hopefully here, many of us have taken our own path in this evolution of understanding, and we're somewhere along that realization point of knowing that I'm going to lay down my can'ts, and I'm going to lay down my shoulds, and I'm going to lay down the culture into which I was born, and I'm going to make my own. And that's really what this is. It's at that point where we want to change our thinking and we want to change our life. And for me, that power point is stepping in and saying, oh, what's lurking around here in my subconscious that I'm doing all this work and I'm trying and I'm praying, yet here it is again. And when I was putting together this talk, it occurred to me that I wanted to take a moment and make very clear, in case I sound like a really, I don't know, rebel minister, that I do believe in the power of prayer. Absolutely 100%. But what I've come to realize is that as long as we have false beliefs living within us, shaping our view of the world and shaping our view of ourselves, a hopeful prayer isn't going to be as effective as it would be if that prayer and that belief were aligned, because that's that point of transformative power. And I thought it's kind of like looking outside and saying, oh, the sky's pink, and I'm going to pray the sky's pink, and I'm going to pray the sky's pink. But we really know it's blue. And as long as we know it's blue, we can pray till the cows come home that the sky's pink. And that sky's still going to be blue. And that's where I think we need to, again, to meld. What what's going on in our belief system with what we're praying for, because that is what a prayer is. There are no difference except one, we're putting our momentary attention on. I'm going to sit down in the morning and I'm going to say my prayers. I'm going to say my happy little affirmations, and then I'm going to walk away, but all this is still sitting here. So let's work on this, because this can be changed. This can be healed. And when we do so, that prayer becomes magnetic to seeing the world that we want to see, to being who we want to be. Okay, well, this may sound a little intense so far. Boom, boom, boom. But what I know is that there are ways that we can empower ourselves, ways that we can encourage ourselves. And when I was thinking about this talk, I kept going back to something that Reverend Mel, she used to be one of the staff ministers here, she told this story of when she was a freshly graduated college student, recently moved to California. And Kathy, maybe you know this story. She'd come out, she's living in Central California, and winter's approaching. And someone says, hey, I have an orchard. I had to cut down some trees. So why don't you come pick up some firewood? Heat your house, save you some money, everybody wins. So Mel takes her little hatchback out, goes out to the orchard, packs it up as full as she can with her firewood. And as she's driving away, she's realized that there's a whole bunch of firewood she's left behind. And it's just going to sit there. It's going to go to waste. And she started thinking, my God, all I had to do was bring a larger container. I could have borrowed a friend's pickup truck. I could have loaded that up and had more of my good. But that didn't occur to her. And that points to the power of being stuck in that thinking that here it is. Now, of course, we know that Mel's gone on and achieved many, many truckloads of firewood since then. And I think that's because she was so willing to say, wait a minute, I don't want a hatchback full. And that's the point. If we take a coffee mug to the water well, how much water are we going to get? What if we take one of those gallon jugs? Now, my plan is to call Denise and get a water truck. That's how much water I want. And that's the same with our good. What is it we're choosing to set as our benchmark? As the belief system that says, this is what's available to me. I deserve this simply by being an expression of spirit. So as I'm rolling along, thinking all these thoughts, one thing kept coming up again and again. And I didn't really know how to put it into words. So I tried to flesh this out with Kate a little bit, and we'll see if I've made any progress. Because what I kept coming back to was, do we really believe? Do we really believe our lives can be different? And are we ready to do more than just imagine that? Because, I'll be honest here, there's things in my life I've wanted to change, but I got pretty complacent in thinking about changing, and thought that that was doing the work for me, that by wanting it, I was somehow actualizing it. But what I realized was the talking about wanting it kept me in the state of inaction about doing my own inner spiritual work and moving my feet to achieve what I wanted. So that's a little trick, I think, that's easy to get caught up in, is maybe talking too much about what we want and letting that become a barrier between stepping into embodying what we want. And then, of course, there's the flip side. And, of course, I'm also guilty of this, which is trying too hard. And what I think is, there's that idea that I can make this happen by my will alone. By God, this needs to be done, So I coined a term here called efforting. So much efforting to force something, anything, to happen. And so what's under that? Well, it's an idea that I'm on my own, right? That who do I have to rely on? Who do I have to depend on? Me. And if I work very, very hard, I can do it. But what this is about being driven. It's not about being inspired. And so whether it looks like being immobilized by wishful thinking or by trying too hard, they're both pointing them to the same thing. And that's that we're stuck in our human mind. We're stuck in our ego in thinking that we're all alone and we're all we have to rely on. And what underlies that, for me at least, was a fear. It was a lack of faith. Because what did I truly have to believe in except myself? And that's a pretty lonely, limiting place to be. And when that walks into your entire worldview, you only know your own capacity. You don't open up to that, dare I say, magical place of letting the universe work through you. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of this teaching, he says, suppose one is laboring under the idea of limitation. Their whole thought is a picture of limitation. Where are they placing themselves in mind? Are they not in substance saying, I cannot have and enjoy good things? Are they demonstrating that they cannot have and accomplish good? It may take time to reshape the basis of their thought, and they must commence by saying, I perceive that because I am what I am, because of this infinite thing that overshadows eternity and finds its abiding place in me, I know that good is now mine, all good. And here's the key part, which he goes on to say, there is no mental coercion in this. We do not will things to be done. Things are brought into being, not by will, but by the power of the self-assertive truth. And so that's what we're pointing to here, is being able to step into trust, into something greater. And what that calls for is surrender, which I think is about one of the hardest things to do, is to lay down our will, our belief that we know it all, and that we can do it by our will alone, and instead allow Spirit to co-create with us, to allow that divine inner knower inside that's in and around and as everything, to know that we are that, and we have a place side by side with that to create something so much more magnificent than we could ever conceive of in our human mind, in that ego mind alone. And I think that when we're looking at this process, it's about being willing to step out of being in control, about wanting to lead from a place of making it happen. And instead, it's surrendering to the process of letting it happen. We allow the time that it takes to unfold in all of its richness and its fullness, to be birthed through us in that wholeness of our being, rather than to be forced into shape through our will from our mind alone. And Ernest Holmes talks to this idea, and he says, since we are dealing with an infinite power, which knows only its own ability to do, and since it can objectify an idea impressed upon it, there can be no limit to what it does for us. But here's the catch. Other than the limit of our inward individual use we make of principle. Our individual use of it can only equal our individual capacity to understand it, to embody it. We cannot demonstrate beyond our ability to provide a mental equivalent of our desires. right there, that's the finger pointing to the moon, saying the moon being God, whatever our idea of that is to us, whatever we are in Spirit's idea of us. Can we step into a co-creation, a shared path that we walk together with the God within to let that divine, greater idea of who we are emerge? Can we lay down those human-based thoughts? And yes, we are human, and that's rich and powerful and beautiful. But can we let that aspect of us be led by Spirit? And for me, when I ask this question of myself, it circles me right back around to what it is that I truly believe in. Madeline Wade, who was one of my ministerial classmates, she had her ordination ceremony a couple months ago. And one of the speakers there shared something that Michael Beckwith, and I'm thinking many of you have heard of him. He's a former religious science minister. He's a founder of Agape. Very, very powerful. They shared a quote that he said, and it rocked my world. And it was very uncomfortable, but powerful. And this is what he says: pain pushes until the vision pulls. So, that led me right into the question of, wow, how much of my life is pain-driven? Pain in the form of fear, so that I'm making decisions based on the fear of what I don't want. And then I asked the question, and I'm still sitting in this question. What would my life look like if it were vision-driven? This is very scary stuff. But it's rich, and it's juicy. And that's that point where we are stepping into something that's beyond the fear and the limitation and the race consciousness and the quicksand, possibly, of what we were. And this is us soaring in the wind. And so what I know is that's not a one-time deal. At every moment, we are presented with this option in every area of our life. Do we want to cross that threshold from pain pushing to a vision pulling us, to calling us into something greater, a greater ideal of what we can be? I don't know. And maybe we just choose to do it over here. And we take baby steps. And that's okay. That's the richness of it. And again, what it's calling to and pointing to is that we have that ability within us to heal what has kept us small, to reframe and rebirth out of an idea of lack of limitation into one of infinite possibility. So, since we're nearing the very near end, here's my title. What's my Mars? Which I haven't talked about at all.
We noticed.
Yeah. It was kind of the background question the whole time. Well, it's pretty simple, really. I'm kind of a little bit of a sci-fi geek, and I am enchanted by the idea that we have a presence on Mars. That we have these little rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, and I know there's another one, on the surface of Mars. And we figured out everything we needed to do to get them there. And most impressively, to descend through the atmosphere safely and then deploy themselves. And the truth is, they continue to function far longer, massively longer. I think Spirit or Opportunity, the estimated lifetime of one of those rovers was about a year. And it went for 8 or longer. Excuse me, I'm a little fuzzy on the facts, but the idea of it is intoxicating. Because what it points to is that in somebody, or most likely a lot of somebody's minds, they conceived of this idea. And in order to make that idea real, what do you think that they had to lay down? What kind of naysayers do you think that they had to just walk away from. And stand firm and true in the conviction that this impossible dream was indeed possible. My God, it is amazing when I think of it in those terms of an accomplishment that says we believe. And so that's my question for all of us. What is our Mars? What is that impossible dream that we have that because maybe this stuff was living within us, we didn't think was available to us? Maybe we didn't think we were capable of it. And so I invite you to consider the possibility that you are. So what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? How do you want Spirit to beam out and gift the world? I invite you to simply consider that possibility. And thank you, and so it is. So I'd like our practitioners to stand, and we will close out with a prayer. So I invite you to close your eyes if you choose. And whatever way feels comfortable for you, allow your awareness to become centered within, into that place for you that is your access point into the infinite. Whether it's at the top of your head, visualizing it flowing open, perhaps it's your heart unfolding like a flower. Maybe it's that flame deep within that ever burns. But whatever it is, I invite you to envision that. And remember that this is the truth of you. That we are each infinite, amazing, breathtaking beings of the divine. Born, living, loving, laughing, being, even crying. Right here, right now, as spirit in form, it's experiencing itself as us and through us. And so in this center of comfort, of remembrance, I invite you to consider simply laying down what no longer serves and letting it be revealed within you the truth of who you are in all your magnificence. That you are truly infinite potential, resting, ready to take flight, however you choose. And that is our gift. That is our joy. That is the beauty of being alive. And so I see for each of you the beauty of your spirit, the beauty of your form, the beauty of the gift that you are. And I thank you. I thank you for being here, shining that light of beauty on all of us, enriching and deepening our lives. For I know that beauty is a ripple effect of God, just like love, kindness, and compassion. And each moment that we choose this, it radiates out into all that is, and we create more, infinitely expanding and returning to restore us. So I stand before you, restored by your beauty, in grace and gratitude, in deep, loving joy. And I invite you all to accept this as you choose, and to join me in saying, and so it is.